When billionaire Marcus Kane receives a terminal diagnosis, he thinks his biggest enemy is time. But when a mysterious woman walks into his office claiming to be the sister of someone from his dark past, he discovers that some secrets refuse to stay buried, calling all love story lovers. Today's episode will melt your heart and maybe even bring a tear to your eye. Ready? Let's begin. Asterisk, the rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 37th floor, each droplet exploding like tiny grenades against the glass. Marcus Kane stood motionless in his corner office, watching the city blur into watercolor streaks below. 6 months. That's all Dr. Chen had given him. 6 months to tie up loose ends. To say goodbye to a life he'd spent 42 years building brick by brick, betrayal by betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on him. Marcus Kane, the man who had destroyed countless lives in pursuit of power, was being destroyed by something he couldn't buy, couldn't intimidate, couldn't control: cancer. The word tasted like copper in his mouth. His phone buzzed. Another message from Victoria, his ex-wife, circling like a vulture now that rumors of his declining health had leaked. She wanted her final pound of flesh, and Marcus knew she'd get it. She always did. The elevator chimed behind him. Marcus didn't turn around. Only one person had access to his private floor without announcement. "You look like hell," came the familiar voice of James Morrison, his oldest friend and the only man who'd ever had the courage to speak to him without fear. "Accurate assessment," Marcus replied, still watching the rain. "What do you want, James? To know why you're dismantling everything we built? The board is panicking. Stock prices are plummeting. You're scaring people, Marcus." Marcus finally turned, and James took an involuntary step back. There was something hollow in Marcus's eyes, something that hadn't been there a month ago. Maybe it's time they were scared. James moved closer, studying his friend's face. "What aren't you telling me?" Before Marcus could answer, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Kane, there's a woman here to see you. Says it's about the Riverside project. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." Marcus frowned. Riverside project had been shelved years ago after the community pushed back against his development plans. "No one should be asking about it now. Send her away," he said. "Sir, she says she has information about Sofia Santos." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sofia Santos, community organizer who had led the fight against Riverside. The woman whose life he had systematically destroyed when she refused to be bought. The woman who had died in a car accident 3 years ago under circumstances that had kept Marcus awake more nights than he cared to admit. "Marcus, what? Send her up," Marcus said into the intercom, his voice barely steady. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Marcus's world tilted on its axis. The woman who stepped out looked like Sofia Santos, but younger, sharper, with eyes that burned with the same righteous fury Marcus remembered all too well. She had Elena's auburn hair, Elena's delicate features, but where Elena had been warm, this woman was ice. "Mr. Kane," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "My name is Sofia Santos. Elena was my sister." The coffee cup in James's hand hit the floor, shattering against the marble. The sound echoed through the office like a gunshot. Sofia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I think it's time we talked about what really happened the night she died." The silence in Marcus's office stretched taut as a wire. James had excused himself after one look at Sofia Santos, recognizing the kind of conversation that could end careers or lives. Now it was just Marcus and the woman who looked like a ghost he'd thought he'd buried. Sofia moved through his office, like she owned it, her fingers trailing along the edge of his mahogany desk, her eyes taking in every detail. She wore a simple black coat, but there was nothing simple about the way she carried herself. This was a woman who had come here with purpose. "Elena used to tell me about this place," Sofia said, her voice deceptively casual. "She said you had an office that looked out over the entire city, like a king surveying his kingdom. What do you want?" Marcus's voice was rougher than he intended. Sofia turned to face him, and he saw Elena in every line of her face. It was like staring at a beautiful nightmare. "Justice," she said simply. "My sister died in a car accident, Mr. Kane. Brake failure on a rainy night. Very convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" just weeks after she'd gathered enough evidence to expose your construction fraud on the Riverside project. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but inside, his chest tightened. Not from guilt, though God knew he had enough of that. From something else. Something that felt dangerously close to relief that the truth might finally come out. "I'm sorry. For your loss," he said, the words automatic. "But I had nothing to do with your sister's death." Sofia laughed, but the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "You destroyed her life systematically. Her reputation, her relationships, her career. You made sure no one would hire her, that no bank would give her a loan. You isolated her until she had nothing left but her fight against you." She was right, and they both knew it. Marcus had used every weapon in his considerable arsenal to break Sofia Santos. It was what he did to people who stood in his way. What he'd always done. "Business," he said quietly. "Murder," Sofia countered. The word hung between them like a verdict. Marcus studied Sofia's face, looking for Elena's warmth, her compassion. The qualities that had made her so dangerous to him. He found none of them. This woman was carved from a different stone. "You can't prove anything," he said. Sofia reached into her coat and pulled out a manila envelope. She set it on his desk with deliberate care. Elena was thorough, she documented. Everything. Your bribes to city officials. As substandard materials you used in construction, as the safety violations you covered up, the families you displaced without proper compensation. Sofia's eyes never left his face. And the mechanic you paid to ensure her brakes would fail? Marcus's blood turned to ice. "You're bluffing, open it." He didn't want to. Every instinct told him to call security, to have this woman removed before she could destroy what was left of his world, but there was something in her eyes, a certainty that made his hands move despite himself. The envelope contained photographs, bank records, recorded conversations, his own voice talking to Tommy Valdez, the mechanic who disappeared to Mexico the week after Elena's death. His own words, caught on tape, sealing both their fates. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "Elena mailed it to me the day before. She died. Insurance, she called it. She knew you were coming for her." Marcus sank into his chair, the documents scattered before him like the pieces of his shattered life. He thought about the 6 months Dr. Chin had given him, about the cancer eating away at his insides. Perhaps this was fitting. Perhaps this was how it was supposed to end. "What do you want?" he asked again, but his voice was different now, hollow. Sofia leaned forward, her hands flat on his desk. "I want you to feel what she felt. I want you to lose everything, piece by piece, until you have nothing left but the weight of what you've done." She straightened, moving toward the elevator. But first I want you to know something. Elena forgave you. Even at the end, even knowing what you'd done, she forgave you. She said everyone deserved a chance at redemption. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. "I'm not Elena," Sofia said, stepping inside. "And I'm nothing like her." As the doors closed, Marcus realized he was holding his breath. The rain continued to batter his windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city like an approaching war. 3 weeks had passed since Sofia Santos had walked into Marcus Kane's office and detonated a bomb in his carefully constructed world. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, of jumping at every phone call, of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But nothing had happened. No police raids, no federal investigations, no headlines screaming his sins across the front page. Waiting was worse than any attack. Marcus found himself at the Metropolitan Museum on a Tuesday afternoon, seeking distraction. In the echoing halls, filled with artifacts of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before his time, the cancer was progressing faster than expected. Some days, the pain was manageable. Other days, like today, it felt like his bones were made of broken glass. He stood before a Roman statue of a fallen emperor, reading the placard that detailed the man's rise to power and eventual downfall. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Ozymandias," came a voice beside him. Marcus turned, and there she was, Sofia Santos, wearing a burgundy dress that made her look less like a vengeful angel and more like a woman. She was studying the statue with the same intensity she'd fixed on him in his office. "Look on my works, the mighty, in despair," she continued, quoting Shelley. "Funny how power always thinks it's permanent." "Following me now?" Marcus asked, though something in his chest loosened at the sight of her. He'd been expecting this confrontation for weeks, and now that it was here, he felt almost relieved. "Hardly. I come here every Tuesday. Alina used to bring me when we were kids." Sofia's voice softened slightly, the first crack in her armor he'd witnessed. She said museums were proof that beautiful things could survive even when everything around them crumbled. They stood in silence, two predators circling each other in a space dedicated to the preservation of beauty. The afternoon light filtering through the tall windows cast long shadows across the marble floor. "You haven't used the evidence," Marcus said finally. Sofia turned to look at him, and he was struck again by how much she resembled Alina, and how completely different she was at the same time. "No," she said, "I haven't." "Why?" Sofia was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with unsettling intensity. "Because I realized something. Alina spent 3 years trying to destroy you and failed. You were too powerful, too connected, too careful. But now, ... double quotes. She paused, tilting her head. "Now you're destroying yourself." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You're selling everything, cutting ties. James Morrison is telling people you're having a breakdown. Your ex-wife is circling like a shark. You look like you haven't slept in weeks." Sofia stepped closer, and Marcus caught a hint of her perfume. Something light and floral that reminded him painfully of Alina. "What's wrong with you, Marcus? What are you running from?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Marcus realized with growing unease that Sofia Santos wasn't just here for revenge. She was here to understand him, to dissect him like one of the ancient artifacts surrounding them, and that was far more dangerous than any evidence she might possess. "Maybe I'm just tired," he said. Sofia smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "Bullshit. Men like you don't get tired, you get desperate." Before Marcus could respond, she turned and began walking toward the next exhibit. Against every rational thought in his head, he followed her. They moved through the museum like dancers following an unheard melody, Sofia leading, Marcus trailing behind, both pretending this was coincidence rather than the careful choreography of two people who couldn't stay away from each other. In the contemporary art wing, Sofia stopped before a painting of a burning city. All orange flames and black smoke against a blood-red sky. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said. Marcus studied the canvas, seeing his own life reflected in the destruction. It's horrifying. Same thing, sometimes. Sofia turned to face him fully. I know what you did to my sister. I know you're guilty of things that would put you away for life. But I also know you're not the same man who ordered her death." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're scared. I know you're alone. I know you're carrying something that's eating you alive." Sofia's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And I know you've been coming here every Tuesday for 3 weeks, hoping I'd be here." Marcus opened his mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because she was right about all of it. Sofia reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. She pressed it into his hand, her fingers lingering against his palm longer than necessary. "If you want to tell me the truth," she said, "call me. If you want to keep playing games, don't. But either way, understand this. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are your sins." She walked away then, leaving Marcus standing alone before the painting of the burning city, holding a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds.
Ow!
On one side was her name and number. On the other, written in Elena's familiar handwriting, were 3 words that made his knees nearly buckle. "Forgiveness is possible." The warehouse smelled of rust and abandonment. A tomb of Marcus's past sins located in the industrial district where he'd built his first empire. Sofia had chosen the location for their meeting, and Marcus understood why. This was where it had all started, where he'd made his first morally bankrupt decision 30 years ago. He arrived first, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Shafts of dying sunlight cut through the broken windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like ghosts. His body ached more each day now, the cancer spreading its roots deeper. But the physical pain paled beside the emotional reckoning that had consumed him since that night at Sofia's apartment. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of secret meetings, of conversations that started as interrogations and ended as confessions. 3 weeks of falling for a woman who had every reason to hate him, who was supposed to be his destroyer, but had somehow become his salvation. Sofia arrived 15 minutes late, and Marcus knew immediately that something had changed. She moved differently, her usual graceful confidence replaced by something harder, more predatory. She wore all black, and her hair was pulled back severely, making her look more like Alina than ever. "I came," she said, her voice flat. "I gave you my word." Sofia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your word. That's rich, coming from you." Something was wrong. This wasn't the woman who had held him while he wept about Alina, who had listened to his confessions without judgment, who had whispered that redemption was possible even for monsters like him. "Sofia, what's going on?" She pulled out her phone and held it up. The screen showed a recording app, red numbers counting the seconds. "I need you to confess," she said. "All of it. Elena's murder, the construction fraud, the bribes, the families you destroyed. Everything." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "What are you talking about? The FBI is outside. They've been listening to every word we've said for the past 3 weeks." Sofia's eyes were cold now, professional. "Every confession you made to me, every detail you shared about your crimes, all of it recorded, all of it admissible in court." The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. Marcus staggered backward, his hand clutching his chest where the pain was spreading like wildfire. "Not Elena's sister," he whispered. Sofia shook her head. "Special Agent Sophia Reeves is Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've been undercover for 6 months building a case against you. Alina Santos was my informant, Mr. Kane. She was working with us when you had her killed." The warehouse spun around Marcus. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered promise of forgiveness had been a lie. He thought about the nights he'd held. Her, the way she'd made him believe he could be something other than the monster he'd always been. The apartment, the books, the stories about your childhood, all fabricated. Though I have to admit, you made it easy. A dying man, desperate for absolution, for someone to love him despite his sins. Sofia's voice was clinically detached now. "The cancer was an unexpected complication, but it worked in our favor, made you more vulnerable, more willing to confess." Marcus sank to his knees on the concrete floor, the weight of his mortality and his betrayal crushing him simultaneously. The night he couldn't finish the sentence. It was part of the job. Nothing more. But even as she said it, Marcus caught something in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that didn't match her words. For just a moment, she looked almost human. "Again, you felt something," he said, his voice barely audible. "That night, when you thought I was asleep and you were crying, you felt something real." Sofia's hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her grip on the phone. "You're a murderer, Mr. Kane. You killed a good woman because she stood in your way. Whatever I felt doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." Marcus struggled to his feet, moving toward her despite the gun she'd drawn from her coat, because if it was real, even for a moment, then maybe Alina was right. Maybe redemption is possible. "Don't come any closer." But Marcus kept walking, his eyes never leaving hers. "Shoot me if you want, I'm already dying. But tell me the truth. First, tell me that night meant nothing to you." Sofia's hand shook as she aimed the weapon at his chest. Behind her, Marcus could hear footsteps, voices shouting commands. "The FBI was moving in. Doesn't matter what I felt," Sofia said, but her voice cracked. "It doesn't change what you are." Marcus stopped just inches from the gun barrel, close enough to see the tears she was fighting to hold back. "No," he said softly, "but it changes what you are." The warehouse door exploded inward, and suddenly the space filled with federal agents, red laser sights painting Marcus's chest like targets. In the chaos and shouting, Sofia lowered her weapon, and Marcus saw the truth in her eyes at last. She had felt something real. It was destroying her just as surely as his secrets had destroyed him. The federal courthouse rose like a monument to justice against the gray October sky, its stone facade weathered by decades of witnessing human frailty. Marcus Kane sat in the defendant's chair, his hands folded in his lap, watching the jury file in for the final day of his trial. For months had passed since his arrest, for months of legal maneuvering and media circus, for months of his body slowly surrendering to the cancer that was winning its war against him. He had 2 months left, maybe less. Dr. Chin had been optimistic. Sofia sat in the gallery, no longer Agent Reeves, but civilian witness number 47. Her testimony already given, her duty discharged. She hadn't spoken to him since the warehouse, but Marcus felt her presence like a constant ache, separate from the physical pain that had become his daily companion. The prosecution had built an airtight case. Marcus's recorded confessions, Elena's documentation, Tommy Valdez's testimony after the FBI had found him in Guadalajara. It was over before it began, really. The only question was whether Marcus would die in prison or in a hospital bed. His lawyer was competent but resigned. They'd discussed plea deals, reduced sentences, appeals. Marcus had listened politely and rejected every suggestion. He would face this head-on the way he'd faced everything else in his life. Judge Martinez called for closing arguments. The prosecutor stood first, a young woman with fire in her eyes who reminded Marcus painfully of Sofia Santos. She spoke about justice, about accountability, about the families Marcus had destroyed in his relentless pursuit of wealth and power. She was good, Marcus had to admit. She painted him as a monster, and she wasn't wrong. When she finished, Marcus's lawyer rose to offer a perfunctory defense, talking about charitable donations and medical conditions and the complexity of human nature. It was professionally delivered and completely unconvincing. Judge Martinez was about to call for jury deliberation when Marcus stood. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the courtroom, "I'd like to make a statement." Judge looked surprised. Defendants rarely spoke on their own behalf, especially when the case was already lost. Marcus's lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering urgent warnings, but Marcus gently pulled free. "I waive my right to remain silent," he said. The courtroom fell dead quiet. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes on him, but the only ones that mattered were Sofia's. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read, her hands clenched, in her lap. 30 years ago, Marcus began, I made my first deal with corruption. A building inspector named Peterson wanted $5,000 to overlook some code violations. I told myself it was harmless, just business. Everyone did it." He paused, steadying himself against the podium. "I was wrong. That first compromise led to a second, then a third, until I couldn't remember who I'd been before I became a man willing to do anything for power." The prosecutor was frantically taking notes. Marcus's lawyer looked like he was having a heart attack. "Sofia Santos was everything I wasn't," Marcus continued. "She was brave, principled, unwilling to be bought or intimidated. She threatened everything I'd built, not with violence or corruption, but with truth. So I destroyed her. Systematically, methodically, without mercy. When that wasn't enough, I had her killed." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Several jurors were writing furiously. Judge Martinez was leaning forward, her expression grave. "I am guilty of murder," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. "I am guilty of fraud, bribery, racketeering, and dozens of other crimes that have poisoned this city for decades. I've spent my life taking from others and giving nothing back except suffering." He turned to look directly at Sofia and saw tears streaming down her face. "But I want the record to show that Sofia Santos died believing in redemption. She died believing that even someone like me could find a way back to humanity. Ever. I thought that was possible until someone showed me that love can exist even in the presence of unforgivable sins." Sofia was shaking now, her professional composure completely shattered. "I don't expect forgiveness," Marcus said, turning back to the judge. "I don't deserve it. But I hope my confession can give some peace to the families I've wronged, and maybe honor the memory of a woman who saw good in everyone, even her killer." He sat down heavily, exhausted by the effort and the truth he'd finally spoken aloud. The courtroom erupted in whispers and movement, but Marcus heard none of it. He was watching Sofia, who was watching him with an expression of pure anguish. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Judge Martinez sentenced him to life in prison, though everyone in the room knew he wouldn't live to serve even a fraction of it. As the bailiffs prepared to escort him away, Marcus looked one last time at Sofia. She was standing now, her hand pressed to her chest as if her heart was breaking. "I'm sorry," he mouthed, though the words could never be enough. Sofia pushed through the crowd until she reached the barrier separating them. The bailiffs paused, uncertain. "Marcus," she said, her voice thick with tears. "That night at my apartment, when you told me you'd never felt loved before, was that true?" Marcus met her eyes, seeing Elena's compassion shining through Sofia's pain. "Yes," he said simply. "Then you were wrong," Sofia whispered, "about not deserving forgiveness, about being unredeemable. Elena loved you enough to forgive you, and she broke off, unable to finish. "Hand you." Sofia reached through the barrier and touched his face gently, the way she had that night when he'd confessed everything to her in the darkness. "I loved you enough to let you save yourself." The bailiffs led Marcus Kane away, and he went quietly, carrying with him the knowledge that he had been wrong about many things in his life, but perhaps not about the possibility of redemption, even for monsters, even for men like him. 3 months later, Marcus Kane died in the prison hospital, his body finally succumbing to the disease that had been racing his conscience to the finish line. Sofia Santos attended his funeral, one of only 3 mourners present. She left a single white rose on his grave, and with it, a letter Elena had written but never sent. Forgiving him for everything. Don't forget to like if this story gave you chills. Subscribe for more intense emotional stories. Comment your thoughts. Did Marcus deserve redemption? Share with someone who loves complex love stories. The end.